everyone, my name is Drin and this is Drin the Moment. This month we are talking about how to survive your first day shift as a new grad RN. This also applies to if you are a nurse that's transferring over to psych, just because the workflow of psychiatric days are much different than med-surg. So we're going to get right into it. What I want you to do is to look at the description of this video and you'll find two links. The first link is going to be a day shift to-do list. It's a Google Doc and it's going to be an overview of what your day is going to look like between 7 and 3:30 p.m. or 15:30. And then the second link is going to be a Google Sheet. Basically, it's a template of my nursing sheet that I use. When you start working, you'll be able to formulate your own type of nursing sheet because every nurse's sheet is going to be different. This is just what I find to be the easiest for me to keep all of my information in one place. If I ever lose this sheet, my whole day kind of sucks. But this is what it is, so I just wanted to give you guys that option to use that to see if it works for you as well. So if we go back to the to-do list, 7 to 7:30 is really where your day starts. So you're going to clock in and go into the change of shift report. I usually take a blank sheet of paper, a white piece of paper like this, and I'll fold it, what is this called? Hamburger way? Like this, and then I'll fold it 3 times to give me 6 boxes. In California, I will get baseline 5 patients, maybe up to 6. So the 6 boxes are for 6 patients. And if you look at that Google Excel sheet, so I don't really actually use that sheet, I'll just make it my own and report. So you can see there's 6. And so I'll spend the beginning of the shift just writing everything that you see in that template. So I'm gonna write everything down, then I'll show you what it looks like. This is all before like the nurse comes in, the previous shift nurse comes in and starts report. So this is what my sheet's gonna look like before report starts. I like to put my meds over here. BHR stands for BH reassessment. This corner is all about charting for me. So my reassessment of the day, IPOC care plan or the interdisciplinary plan of care, and then N stands for note. It is going to be like my overall shift note that I'm going to pull over to the notes at the end of the day. So change of shift report, it's going to have 3 different types of reports depending on the facility that you're working at. The first type is doing a tape recorder. So usually the previous shift will record everything on a tape recorder and you'll just listen to that tape recorder. The second way is that you're going to speak one-to-one with the nurse that had the previous patient assignment and you guys you're taking on that same patient assignment. Or the third way is that you're going to be sitting in the room with all the other nurses that you're working with, and one by one the previous shift nurses will come and tell everybody about the patients that they took care of. For the purposes of this video, the fake report that I'm going to be playing for you is not real. It's not HIPAA. I totally made it up. The names are made up, the doctors are made up, the diagnoses are made up, the stories are made up, so please do not come for me. You're going to listen to report and listen kind of harder for the patients that you're taking care of.
In 510, I have Angel Hart, 22-year-old male, here for depression under Dr. Boyd, voluntary, came in with SI with a plan to jump into traffic or jump off bridge. Slept throughout the night, 7 hours, no PRNs. Per PM shift report, continues to endorse SI, denies HI, 8 out of 10 depression, 5 out of 10 anxiety. His attending groups started Lexapro yesterday, so his second dose will be today. Discharge plan is pending right now, but will most likely return home. And then in 511, Sadie Patrick, 37-year-old female, here for paranoid schizophrenia under Dr. Sanchez, is here involuntary on a 5150 for grave disability and danger to others, was originally brought in by police after being found on street, presenting with acute psychosis. Patient is paranoid, delusional, poor impulse control, denies SI and HI, positive for command auditory hallucinations to harm others, and visual hallucinations of shadows. Patient is homeless and non-compliant with medications, multiple previous psychiatric admissions, got held by the Ativan 2 at 0300 for agitation with good effect, and has a pending discharge.
Report goes really fast and you're not always going to grab every single piece of information, so don't try to write everything down. So the most important thing that I'm going to be looking for is just the reason why they were admitted. You're not always going to get everything from report. So that is what my sheet looks like coming out of report. Once report is over, if you guys look back at the to-do list, from 7:30 to 8 a.m., you're going to be doing 3 things: eyes on the patient, reading the chart, and prepping for your medication pass. So eyes on the patient really just means you don't necessarily have to do this. I don't do this all the time because my mental health associates are doing 15-minute rounds, but I always like to just kind of put eyes on the patient to make sure that, one, they exist and they're not missing from the unit, and two, I want to know if they're already awake, because that's going to help me task out which patient I'm going to see first. If someone's already up and awake and will most likely be ready to take their medication at 8 a.m. versus say like 9:30, then I'm going to start with them. But based on the acuity of my patient load, I'm going to base my tasks based on the acuity. I've looked at my patients, and usually when you're a new grad, you're going to start with 1 to 2 patients for your first couple of shifts, and then you'll finally take a full load. So that's why for the example, I only have 2 patients here. You looked at your patients, then you're going to go find a computer and sit down and kind of fill in the puzzle of the template that I gave you guys. So you're going to look for the vital signs. Usually the previous shift will take your morning vitals. Sometimes you are expected to take your morning vitals depending on your facility. Just make sure you get your vital signs before you give your meds. Then you want to look at labs. So this is important, especially for patients that are on medication in which a blood level is connected to it. So things like lithium or Depakote. Because majority of medical or psychiatric units, patients are medically cleared, I don't want to say that labs aren't important, but they're not as important as, an ICU where you're looking at sodium or potassium, because most of the time they are going to be within normal limits. And then you are going to look at your med pass. So what I like to do is just write down the times that I'm giving the medication. This comes with time, but I also like to see when the medication was started. Is this a new medication for the patient? Because that's going to change the interaction that you're having with that patient. If you walk in and say like, hey, I have your Lexapro this morning, and they say, I've never taken that before, that's going to vastly change the time spent in that room. Say I look into the computer and I see that this patient in 510 has medication pass at 9 and 1300. So I am going to write that down like this. 9 and 1300. And then it looks like 511 doesn't have any meds. So I'm just going to write that like this. No meds. You can go 2 ways with your medication pass. I like to get my meds ready because I have time in that first half hour. If your medication room has a place that you could still lock up those meds after you've pulled them from the medication cabinet, that's the right way to do it. And that's really the only way that you should be doing it. If it doesn't have that, then you're going to have to pull your meds as you're passing your meds. If I have that time, I'll use that half hour to get my medications ready for passing them. Because usually when a patient comes up and says, hey, I'm ready for my medication, they kind of expect for you to have it on you already. To shorten that amount of time, I like to have pulled my medication out and it be ready to just go into the medication room and then grab it. What you want to do throughout the day is cluster your care. As a new grad, you might not be able to do this because you can't be multitasking and ensuring that you're doing everything correctly. So here on the to-do list, I've written in between the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., you technically can do these 3 different tasks all at the same time with one patient. For the purposes of ensuring that you're really getting that concept down, I made it so the first hour is your morning assessments and you're just focusing on assessments only, getting to know your patient, understanding what their night was like, understanding what the past 24 hours was like, and especially talking about their plan of care and finding out what their goal is for the day. And also trying to figure out an insight as to what they think about their stay here, just getting that orientation of what they think about being admitted to the hospital. Because knowing more about that information is going to change or vastly change the flow of your day. So after you've gotten your morning assessments, we've talked to these 2 patients, Angel Hart and Sadie Patrick. You're then going to go move on to your medication pass. Usually I'll also ask, hey, do you want to eat breakfast and then do you want to eat breakfast and then take your medication? Do you want to take your medication now? We're really trying to focus on what the patient wants and needs and planning our day around that. I find that a lot of nurses that have a hard time scheduling their day is because they're trying to control a lot of their tasks based on their day and not based on what the patient needs or wants. It's so much easier when you just go with what the patient wants. You spend the 0900 hour passing your medication. With your medication passed, you're obviously using the 5 rights of medication administration, asking the patient whether or not they have questions about the medication, if they're feeling any side effects about the medication. I also take the opportunity to ask them if they like the medication that they're on and if they feel like they need us as nurses to help advocate talking to the doctor because they're, one, either forget to talk to the doctor about it or they're scared to talk to the doctor about it. Once you pass your medication, you are going to sit down and chart. Charting is probably my least favorite activity of being a nurse. I try to do this part really fast because in my head, I'd rather spend time with the patients than sit behind a computer and chart about what I did with the patients. But there's that saying that if you didn't chart it, it didn't happen. So you always want to chart everything that you've done. As you guys can see, the first 2 hours of your day, first 3 hours of your day. Once it hits 10 o'clock, your morning med pass is done and there should be some downtime on psych units. This is also around the time that groups start, so the patients are going to be busy. Around 11 o'clock when your charting is done, you want to start rounding on your patients and seeing how they're doing throughout the day. They're more awake. This is kind of the hard thing about morning assessments is that it's 8 a.m. They just woke up. If you can just sit here and imagine waking up and someone over your bed and saying hey, are you feeling suicidal this morning? It's not necessarily the best assessment, so I'll always reassess that question around 11 o'clock and see if they're feeling anxious or depressed. If they need any PRN medication is kind of around the time that they're not necessarily offering the PRN medication, but trying to assess if PRN medication is needed. 12 o'clock, nothing's really happening. You're probably gonna go get lunch, and then 1300 is when medication pass happens again. I honestly like getting my medic over and done with. This afternoon pass, I'll probably be passing it at 12 instead of 1. And I like to get all of these basic tasks done because if you guys look at the bottom of this to-do list, there's multiple different scenarios that can happen throughout the day and really throw off the timing of your day, especially if you get hit with either admission, transfers, or discharges, which these are always going to happen. You never know what phone calls with family members are going to be like. And depending on your communication with physicians, you never know what that's going to be like. And then also you're going to have codes. The codes that are most frequent in a psychiatric hospital are violent patient codes, in which patients get agitated. Those are more likely than the normal code blue of a cardiac arrest or a rapid response. So the great thing about having this throughout the day is that you're able to kind of see tasks that you finished. So say after my medication pass at 0900, I'll just exit off. I charted for this first patient. I'll exit off. It kind of helps me go with the flow of the day, and then lets me know what I still need to do so that if I do need to change the flow of my day, I know what work has been done and what work still needs to be done. And then 1400 is kind of when all of your stuff should be squared away for the day. You know what your patients are like going into the next shift, and then you're gonna sit and get ready for your own change of shift report, and you wanna make sure that you're giving all the information that happened in the last 8 hours when you were responsible for this patient. Different facilities use different reporting tools. The 2 tools that I'm familiar with are iHand and SBAR. I think across the board, SBAR is the more used reporting tool. S stands for situation, B stands for background, A stands for assessment, and R stands for recommendation. Wow, I can't believe I remember that. I find that my template has all the information needed. You're just going to be talking about basically the basic information: room number, patient, who they are, the doctor, and then how the day went. What was your assessment? What are the interventions that you intentionally engaged in? Did you make sure that the patient went to group? Did they take their medication? Are they compliant with the medication? Is the medication effective? You're going to talk about any wonky vitals that you may or may not have occurred throughout the day. And then you always want to mention what the disposition is. What are we working towards? What is something that the next shift wants to ensure that we are doing to make sure that we get to this discharge goal? And then finally, 1500 comes around. You're done with everything. All of your charting is done, PRNs are checked off, your patients are squared away. And in change of shift report, you really want to make sure that you're not giving too much information, because like we saw in the beginning of the day, any information that we didn't get from change of shift actual report, you can find in the chart. You want to leave, the next shift wants to get started. So make sure that you're spending a minute or 2 on each patient, especially when it comes to having a full patient load of 5 patients, and then you spend 2 minutes on each patient. That's already 10 minutes. And then there's 4 other nurses that have to give report. So you don't want to be taking majority of that 30-minute slotted time for report to say things like, you know, to talk about like subjective things about the patient. Like you really want to focus on objective things that will help the next shift have a smooth shift. That's kind of basically what an average day is, and that's like the bare bones. Nothing exciting happened, but those are the things that you want to focus on, is your time management and your communication with all the other team members. So as a new grad, you really want to understand the interworkings of the unit, like who's buddy with who. How can you accomplish your tasks the fastest and the most efficient while working with your coworkers? Time management is very important. You're going to really focus on clustered care and patient-centered care. Okay, that's all I have for you guys. Hopefully this information was helpful to some extent, kind of all over the place, but I tried to organize it as best as possible. It's kind of harder to teach something through a computer instead of in front of a person live. If there's any questions or something that you're struggling, if you're a new grad and you're struggling with your day-to-day tasks as a nurse, leave it in the comment section, ask some questions, and I'll try my best to answer them. Until then, I will see you next month.